There is no ethical consumption under capitalism. Hello lovelies, welcome back to my channel. My name is Bryony. You're here on a Tuesday, so we actually have kind of deep dives into the environmental, ethical and social issues with the beauty industry, and also this is kind of encompassing the whole way that we consume as a whole in general. Of course, we're going to be creating this lovely fun makeup look today, and all the products I use are cruelty-free, vegan and not owned by parent companies that test on animals. All of my sources are in the description box down below, same as all of the products that I've used on my face. Without any further ado, let's jump straight into it. But really though, let's have a look at the issue and see what, if anything, we can do about it. You know that I'm not an expert, but I am also very passionate about this issue, and that's kind of why, like, even at the start of every single one of my videos I say all of the products I use are cruelty-free, vegan and not owned by parent companies that test on animals. I also promote on my Instagram the fact that I shop secondhand predominantly, or as ethically as possible, and also you know that I'm vegan. So clearly I do actually abide by the fact that I believe that the purchases we make can make a difference, otherwise what would I be doing here? If you want experts, they're actually all cited down below, of course, because I'm not an expert in this field, I'm just very passionate about it. I do really recommend that you read them. There is one in particular that's only 37 pages long that I absolutely recommend you read. For me personally, I actually do have quite a few issues with shopping ethically, you know, as low waste as possible, etc, etc, because it is actually quite hard to access for people, and like for me one of the main issues actually comes down to the fact that we have a 40-hour work week. Now, the 40-hour work week is an archaic system in my mind because it's based on the fact that you've got one person that is the breadwinner that goes to work their actually 40-hour work week, and then you have a nuclear family, so then you've got someone at home that is caring for the family and running the household and all of the many jobs that entails. Anyone that says that that's not like work is lying, or they just are rich enough to have someone else do that for them, or they're married to someone that does all of that for them anyway. But in reality these days it's more close to 60-hour work weeks in the Western world at least, and then you have a longer commute on top of that. And also both partners have to work if you are in a relationship, or if you're single then you have to take on all these jobs by yourself, or God forbid you're a single parent, then you have to do literally everything, and then there's more judgment on you if you're not making everything from scratch, if you're not living the most ethical lifestyle and creating everything at home, etc, etc. And the fact that fast fashion is accessible doesn't matter, especially with the fact that wages have gone down year on year in comparison to cost of living. So those are my main issues with the inaccessibility of shopping ethically and also the fact it takes a lot longer and more money to be able to shop ethically too, and you typically have to have access to a car to be able to drive places, or you have to live in an area where you have the accessibility for this as well. Capitalism, or Capitalism, as my lovely husband calls it. He's very creative like that. Ultimately, like, I'm not a big fan of capitalism. I do believe that people can buy and sell things in a way that is actually pretty good. At least that's what I've talked about in the past, but then after I was done reading all of these papers, now I'm like, I'm reconsidering a lot of things in my life, shall we say. There is one particular paper, that's the one I talked about just before, that I think that everyone should read. Like I said, it's 37 pages. I do wish it was made as a podcast though, because I don't know about you, but finding time to read is very hard for me. The only reason I do read is to look into stuff for these videos. Okay, I'm gonna actually have to read out this one quote to you because they are way smarter than me and there's no way I can really paraphrase this. On the one hand, the hand of classic critical theory, consumption desires pre-present the false needs the system produces to chain us to endless processes of self-recreation and actualization through consumption. In this argument, consumer desire loses sight of its real needs. Consumer desire is productive but also problematic, precisely because what it demands is always irreducible to need. So basically, the capitalist consumer culture must always be excessive. The arguments that they make in this paper, and honestly a common theme across all of the other papers that I saw, is that capitalism itself is actually quite self-destructive, but that ethical consumerism is the thing that is keeping capitalism alive and actually making it a positive thing. It's no longer the antagonist, it's actually making it the protagonist, because there is a way that you can shop ethically and also continue to buy more than what we need, if that makes sense. It's basically reinforcing conventional capitalist consumerism. So personally, I found this really interesting because you know that I always try to advocate for shopping better, and I know as well so many people that are actually also doing the same thing too. Ethical consumption maintains capitalism because we found a solution to the evil that is like overconsumption, because you can consume but ethically instead. There is another issue with the fact that whilst we really want to shop ethically, so many of us actually aren't doing this regularly anyway, so there is a bit of a gap that's actually formed here, and this gap is actually incredibly important too. So since most people aren't actually shopping in the way that they say that they're going to, so say like shopping exclusively through B corporations or fair trade, etc., again, inaccessibility, I'm just raising that. There's the argument in this paper, and actually a few other ones, is the fact that this gap sustains a neoliberal marketplace. This choice in itself suggests that individual choices can change a system. Wrong. So this form of capitalism is going to save us from the environmental, social and ethical destruction that capitalism brings about in the first place, because we've found capitalism light, effectively. Obviously this boils down to the main issue that ethical consumption still needs to be a growth-driven consumerist way of life. It is the ethical consumption paradox, created by these people right here. This gap, because of the fact that we can't all or don't all shop the way that we want to ethically, due to the fact that we all make these points of rationalization and all of like the inaccessibility, all of the other reasons that you already know as to why it's kind of really hard to shop ethically all the time. However, it's actually not all the individual's fault. The main thing is the many systems that we live within have actually created this issue. However, the onus is on individual responsibility, and that's the thing that creates like this almost like constant fear that you're doing the wrong thing. At least that's what I definitely suffer from, and it's something that apparently a lot of other people do as well. Let's discuss the whitewashing and greenwashing epidemic. Guilt and responsibility is consistently, consciously pushed onto the individual and the consumer, as opposed to like the companies that are actually, I don't know, creating this waste and lobbying the governments to make sure that they don't have to be responsible for cleaning it up, instead making us feel like we have to all be Captain Planet and save the world. We are the ones that are told to recycle their waste, to not buy from companies that use slave labour, to also shop local and shop small and sustainable and plastic free and everything else that goes along with that. And of course, rather than companies actually changing their ways, the onus again falls on the consumer to do your research and make sure that you are fully aware of every single company's like backstory, their sourcing, everything that goes along with all of that. Only you can prevent bad capitalism. The issue is that these larger companies that are obviously like doing like worse things for the environment, socially, ethically, everything, they are far more accessible, they are of cheaper price, they are, well, accessible in terms of like location, everything. So say you just want to have to go to one supermarket as opposed to like, I don't know, 10 different places every weekend because you do not have time for that. I'm definitely one of those people. I only shop at a supermarket. That probably makes me a very bad person, according to a lot of people. So we're the ones that are made to feel bad for the fact that we aren't able to go the extra length and do all of these extra things and support only the good companies as opposed to the ones that are everywhere, cheaper, easier to get to. Like I said, 40-hour work week is a lie. And again, single parents are the ones that have to suffer the most. Oh, and also how you get to these places. If you're not driving an electric car or walking there or biking there or something, then you are also a terrible person because then you're actually using petrol. And then even if you are using an electric car, then those actually use like lithium batteries, which are made with slave labor too. So it's all your fault basically for existing and needing to eat to survive. The onus is, like I said, on the individual, and we wear this guilt day in, day out. We're constantly made to feel bad. To me, this is wrong. This is not how it should be. I do not like the way that everything is just on us as opposed to, I don't know, stipulations being in place for these companies that are doing these bad things to have to pay their workers fairly, to have to make sure that they can't block unions if they are sourcing their materials from places that exploit slave labor, that they have to be part of changing that system, aka what's happening with mica. If these companies weren't creating these terrible waste streams to begin with and then leaving the onus on the individual to have to deal with, the whole point about capitalism being bad is the fact that it's rewarding people for finding the most lucrative ways to make money and expending the least amount of money to make the most amount of money. And the only way they're actually going to be able to do any of that is by exploitation. Like, seriously, there is no billionaire around that hasn't gotten to that point because they haven't exploited people. So to obviously answer all of these problems, whitewashing and greenwashing is something that we are seeing now, and we're only going to see more and more of it, like I talked about in the ageism video, and like I also talked about when we discussed clean beauty and the issues that come along with that. Now, I know that my ageism video doesn't have many views on it, but my gosh, I put so much work into that, and honestly, I think that that's one of my most important videos that I've actually made, and I really do recommend going to watch it. Freud already got involved with this whole situation as well, before we were even in this terrible situation. This also comes down to this saying, I'm not going to be able to say this, fetishistic disavowal, where the fetishist, the marketer, is able to believe in the fantasy of green capitalism at the same time as recognizing it's nothing but a fantasy. So this obviously results in the really feel-good advertising that comes up from places like H&M, like these other brands that are doing like these eco-conscious collections, and they're like, see, look, this is made from like recycled materials, this is really good, don't think about how little we've paid our workers or anything like that. Don't think about that. Let's quickly discuss the waste from fast fashion. Okay, so I do not have to tell you how bad fast fashion is for the environment, for society, for the people that make the clothes, for literally everything, just how terrible it is. Do I? I don't really think so. Like, I've included like a few things on here, and there's also links down below if you have no idea, which would be really surprising to me because I think that everyone at this point definitely knows just how terrible it all is. The onus is on the consumer, and the fact that it's actually really hard to dispose of clothing in a safe way. So that's why they land up in our landfills, which then also produce massive amounts of methane when they go to these landfills as well. Not only are these items that we're buying made in bad ways, so they're using cheaper materials which are thinner, which will go see-through faster, which will rip faster, and also the threads that they're using, because I used to sew a lot. I wasn't very good at it, but I actually understand all of the theory behind it all. So the materials and the finishings that they're actually using are very cheap. They're thinner than what they should be, and you know, overlocking thread is actually one of the worst threads in terms of like construction of garments. So this is very popular to actually use these because they're much bigger and you get a much longer thread from these overlocking threads. And because they're using this not only on women's clothes, they're using this on children's clothes as well. So you know how hand-me-downs used to be able to be much more of a thing? Well, you can save a lot of money by just using overlocking thread to construct your entire garment, as opposed to just using multiple ones of these threads to finish the edges. Everything's just done in a way to get the garment made as quickly as possible so that it can get thrown away very quickly as well, so that it can get replaced, because replacement culture is important when you're aiming to be a capitalistic god. Good quote here as well. Our desire for new clothes sees more than 100 billion garments produced worldwide each year, more than double what was made in the year 2000. What's more, of the textiles made each year, 85% of this ends up in landfills or incinerated. So we're buying 60% more clothing but keeping garments for half as long. And it's been predicted by the global fashion agenda that apparel consumption will rise 63% to 102 million tons by 2030 if current trends continue, with most of our clothes heading straight to landfill. A 63% rise is a pretty big deal. Now, of course, like when it comes to natural fibers, they're much easier to biodegrade, like cotton and stuff. There is a lot of whitewashing and greenwashing about people using like wool and silk and stuff. The Fashion Collective is a fantastic Instagram and also website if you actually want to find out how not only unethical using animal fibers is, or animal skin is, but also how damaging it is for the environment and how much more it actually uses in terms of water, and also in terms of like the social aspect of it as well, because of the workers' wages that are paid to make it. Like I said, there is no ethical consumption under capitalism, so Don't go fooling yourself that like buying leather will biodegrade, because it actually won't. The clothing and textile industry is the second biggest polluter on the planet, only second to oil. And of course the recycling of these clothes is a massive other mission unto itself as well. And then of course people that are trying to sell these clothes on, like Depop or whatever, they get told off for gentrifying secondhand clothes too. Basically, no matter what, you're not allowed to win. So can you actually trust ethical companies if you are still trying to buy that way? Which is a good thing. I will not tell you that it's not a good thing to try and buy from better companies and support smaller companies, support good companies. None of it's really going to change the system. You're just providing better people with resources, which I still believe is a good thing. So ethical companies do actually exist. It's getting harder and harder to tell who is actually ethical. Let's just have a chat about what good things you should look out for when you're actually seeing if a brand is ethical, which again is a privileged thing to do because you have to have extra time to be able to do this. So check out their policy page. They will normally like sing it from the heavens about all of their internal policies to make sure that everything is created ethically. Even if it's made overseas, I know that sometimes people are like, oh, it should be made in your home country. Sometimes it's actually kind of not possible. We don't really have much in the way of fabric manufacturing in New Zealand, and you can actually also support third world countries that do need support and still shop ethically as well. Like we've got a brand in New Zealand called Sooty, I believe it is, and they produce things overseas, but they're still an ethical company. They still have a lot of checks and balances in place, you know. So you can also look out for accreditation. So there's Fair Trade, Certified B Corp, World Fair Trade Organization, Fair Trade Certified. So look out for these images right here. And also if you're curious about anything to do with B Corporations, I've actually done an entire video on it up here, and beauty brands that you can buy from that are B Corp certified as well. And honestly, I'm expecting that list to grow over time because everyone is trying to buy better. You can also check out ethicalconsumer.org as well. They have a list of like over 40,000 brands on there, and they have a lot of checks and balances themselves. You can make this choice yourself to have a search on there too. And also have a look at some reviews online about the brand, because if there's dirt or anything that is showing that they're actually not ethically made or sustainable or anything, you'll actually find that out too from there, because people love to talk about this stuff, especially if they feel like they did a good thing and then they got jibbed about it, you know, like people will always say about that stuff. And then of course ask them if you're unsure, like send them an email. If a company is proud of what they're doing, they will absolutely tell you how proud they are of what they're doing and give you all of their checks and balances in place and want to have that communication with you, because ethical brands do tend to be smaller brands as well. So that's just the final step you can take. Now, like I said, I know this takes a lot of extra time. It's a privileged thing to be able to do all of this stuff. It's just, if this is what you're wanting to do, that would be what I'd recommend. And there's also some amazing creators actually here on YouTube that do exclusively work around ethical and sustainable companies. Greenwashing and whitewashing is such a massive thing that is only going to grow, and it's only going to get harder and harder to actually decipher what is good and what isn't good. And there's also the fashion report. I'll link that website down below as well, because every single year they have a look into all of the companies that will respond to them, and see about like their supply chain, see about everything, and just see how transparent they are or how opaque they are, how abusive they are to staff, etc., and all of the environmental things that they've got in place too. So there's a lot of work that is actually happening out there, which is fantastic. It's just the fact that it's a lot for an individual to try and deal with when you're already trying to deal with a lot yourself, and I do want to recognize that. What's the best thing that we as individuals can do? The best thing that we can honestly do is combine ethical consumption with less consumption. I kind of feel like that's me saying florals in spring, groundbreaking. Sidebar, I'm so glad that lip gloss has come back in. So glad. We also just need to recognize the fact that we individually don't really have much power to change the entire systems that are in place, aka capitalism. Like, there's not very much that we as individuals can do. Personally, I do not have many high hopes for large brands actually making systemic changes, because, well, same as like governments, until we have governments refusing to take money from people that are obviously doing bad things objectively, like oil companies, etc. I wish that I could make it so that every single political party only got money from taxes to actually promote themselves, and therefore no lobbying could actually happen and no buying votes could actually happen. I mostly have hope for the future generations that are actually coming up through the ranks that will be able to make these changes that we so desperately need. Because the thing is, like, we can all pretty obviously see that there are a lot of systemic issues and that we as individuals, we can't really come up against capitalism and make meaningful changes against it because we're still living in a system where we do have to work these jobs. We do have to buy these products in order to be able to survive, and there's not really a way to make it all just get fixed instantly. And I feel pretty bummed having to say that. Like, we can try our best, but the systems that are in place are systemic, huge, owned by billionaires, which we can try and fight. But in terms of, like, as a consumer, the power that you have just as a consumer is quite small, but you can still make a difference, which is why I'm still like, we wouldn't be where we are right now with the vegan movement. We wouldn't have all of these big brands actually making all of these products unless veganism was a huge movement, because there's enough market there for people to be like wanting these products, you know? So like I said, you or I will never fully be an ethical consumer. Helping people with the resources, like I said down below, and just the fact that we all need to realize that none of us is perfect and we can try our best to become better, but we're coming up against a very huge beast with, like, capitalism in the way it is now. So I just don't want you to go beating yourself up because you haven't been able to change the entire world. Whilst we want to do that, it's sadly going to be a while until we can get to that point. But you can still keep making noise about it, still keep highlighting issues. That's all really, really important stuff, and I don't want this video or the studies that are down below to, like, quash that spark, quash that drive to try and do better, because that's the most important thing, to keep that fire, to keep that spark going, to keep wanting to fight the good fight, because that's really, really important. And I commend people that are actually doing all of this work too, because I think it's so important for trying to highlight issues in order to make change. Whew, there we go, presidential speech over. What do you think? Do you agree with me? Do you think that actually, no, you know what, I love capitalism and I actually really want to exploit people to make more money, and by the way, I own like 10 houses and I get everyone paying my mortgage and my retirement for me. If you're one of those people, please, I would also like to hear your viewpoint on why you think that that's a good thing too. Anyway, lovelies, saltiness aside, I hope that you all enjoyed this video, and I'll see you again next Tuesday. I'm going to try and come up with Sunday videos as well. It's just work is a lot at the moment, because if you didn't know, I work full-time too, and these videos take a long time to do. Anyway, if you did make it all the way to the end of this video, please leave the hat emoji in the comments down below, and thank you so much for talking with me in this video, and I'll chat with you down in the comments. Thank you, lovelies. Bye. Gosh, I'm already starting to sweat. The cicadas are waking up. Oh no. It's not even 9:30 yet. They're not meant to wake up yet. No. Like, the sun, I swear, it just comes and goes. Like, it has its own free will. Ah.